Every Tuesday morning for 9 straight years, the same unmarked white van pulled up to the chain-link fence outside a small electrical repair shop on the edge of the Garfield Industrial District. No knock, no call ahead. Just a clipboard shoved through the sliding window, a stack of damaged equipment strapped to a dolly, and a 3-day deadline stamped in red. No greeting, no thank you. No explanation for why the voltage regulators were scorched, why the control panels had been forced open with something that wasn't the right tool, or why a company the size of Hargrove Industrial Solutions kept sending its most broken equipment to a one-man shop that didn't even have a proper sign out front. To the people at Hargrove, it was a line item. Outsourced repair, Zone 4, non-critical. A rounding error on a procurement spreadsheet somewhere on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. But to the man inside that shop, every one of those deliveries was rent. It was the electric bill. It was the orthodontist appointment he'd been putting off for his daughter. It was February, and the heat still worked. And that mattered more than he ever let himself say out loud. His name was Gordon Palk. He was 41 years old, and his hands told the whole story if you knew how to read them. Scarred along the knuckles, stained faintly gray near the nail beds, steady in a way that only comes from years of doing precise work under pressure. Medium build, a little broader than he used to be, brown hair going silver at the temples. The kind of face that had clearly been handsome once, and had become something better than handsome. Lived in, dependable, the face of a man who showed up. His shop sat between a tire distributor and a vacant lot, on a street that Google Maps still listed as Weston Repair. Because Gordon hadn't gotten around to updating the business name after he bought it from the original owner 6 years ago. It was 800 square feet, one workbench that ran the full length of the back wall, a pegboard with every tool in its place, a small desk in the corner with a laptop, a cup of pens, and a framed photograph of a little girl missing her 2 front teeth. Her name was Poppy. She was 10. She was the reason the shop opened at 6 every morning, and the reason the lights went off every night, before 8. Because Poppy needed help with homework, and Poppy needed dinner that wasn't from a bag, and Poppy had a way of looking at him across the table that reminded Gordon of her mother so much that some evenings it still caught him sideways. Even now, 4 years after Claire died, Claire had been a teacher, 3rd grade. She used to come home smelling like dry erase markers and say she'd had a good day, and Gordon believed her every time. When she was diagnosed, they had 9 months. They used them well. They didn't waste a single one pretending things were fine. They talked, and they planned, and they said everything that needed to be said, and then she was gone, and Gordon was left with a 6-year-old who had her mother's eyes and a repair shop that barely broke even. He rebuilt the business the same way he rebuilt every broken piece of equipment that came through his door, methodically, without drama, one honest repair at a time. He took any job, residential, commercial, industrial. He fixed things other shops turned away. He developed a reputation, not a loud one, not a branded one, just the quiet kind that spreads through a certain type of industry the way water finds its level. Word got around that Gordon Palk didn't guess. He diagnosed. He understood electrical systems the way some people understand music. Not just the notes, but the rhythm underneath them, the place where something had slipped out of tune. That was how Hargrove Industrial Solutions found him. Or more accurately, that was how their facilities coordinator found him through a subcontractor referral. 8 years ago, when Hargrove had a batch of fried motor controllers that their internal team couldn't turn around fast enough, and someone remembered that the guy on Weston Street had a fast turnaround and didn't ask too many questions, Gordon fixed the controllers in 48 hours. The white van came back the following Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that, and every Tuesday for 9 years. He never met anyone from Hargrove beyond the driver, a quiet man named Dale who wore the same brown jacket in every season and had the same 2-word response to every question: just sign. Gordon signed, he fixed, he invoiced. He got paid on net 30, which wasn't fast but was reliable, and reliability was something you could build a life around. The woman who ran Hargrove Industrial Solutions was named Constance Dre. Gordon knew her name only because it appeared occasionally in the local business journal, which he sometimes read on his lunch break when Poppy was at school and the shop was quiet. Constance was 44. She had taken the company from regional to national in 6 years, a fact that journalists seemed to find extraordinary, and that Constance seemed to find insufficient. She drove strategy the way Gordon drove screws, with consistent torque and no wasted motion. The company expanded into 3 new sectors, opened facilities in Ohio and Texas, and landed a federal infrastructure contract that made the front page of the business section. Inside Hargrove, the story was more complicated. Rapid expansion had a cost that didn't show up on the quarterly report. Supply chains stretched thin. Quality checks traded for speed. Senior technical staff replaced by junior hires, who were cheaper and more available. A culture that had once rewarded careful, methodical work quietly shifted to reward whoever spoke loudest in the right meetings. The people who noticed this were also the people least likely to say so. They just did their jobs and hoped the foundation held. It didn't. The first sign was a product return. A significant one, a run of industrial power distribution units that had passed internal inspection, but failed in the field, 3 of them within 60 days of installation. A client in the Midwest, a manufacturing plant, threatened to walk. Then, a second client flagged similar problems, then a third. Internal investigation revealed a pattern that no one wanted to name out loud. Corners had been cut. Not by accident, not all at once, but in the gradual way that happens when growth becomes the only thing that matters, and the people who ask inconvenient questions stop getting invited to the right rooms. By the time the board convened an emergency session, Hargrove's stock had dropped 11% in 2 weeks. 2 senior engineers had resigned. A federal compliance review was scheduled, and the newest flagship product, an integrated control system that Constance had personally championed for 2 years, was failing stress tests in a way that the internal team couldn't fully explain. It was during that review that someone pulled the repair logs. 9 years of outsourced equipment, hundreds of units, a return rate of less than 2% on everything that came back from the Weston Street shop, compared to a company-wide average of nearly 12. One contractor who had quietly, consistently, fixed things that Hargrove's own teams had given up on. Name, Gordon Palk. Address, 2214 Weston Street, Garfield District. Constance read the file twice. Then she sat back in her chair and did something she hadn't done in a long time. She was quiet. 9 years. She had sent this man 9 years of broken equipment, the things too damaged or too complicated for her own engineers, and she had never once asked who he was. He was a vendor number in a system. He was a line item, and now, with her flagship product failing, and her technical team running out of ideas, his name was at the top of a list of people they should have spoken to much sooner. On a gray Wednesday morning in November, Constance Dre drove herself to Weston Street. No assistant, no communications director, no entourage, just her, in a dark gray coat, stepping out of a company sedan into a cold wind, and standing for a moment in front of a shop with a faded sign, and a chain-link fence and a light on inside, that meant somebody was already working. She pushed open the door. Gordon looked up from a disassembled relay panel on the bench. He recognized her immediately. Not because he knew her personally, but because her face had been in the Business Journal 3 months ago, above a headline about federal contracts. He set down his screwdriver. He didn't say anything. He waited. Constance looked around the shop for a moment. At the workbench, the pegboard, the tools in their places. At the small desk in the corner. At the photograph of the little girl. Then she looked at Gordon. "I think I owe you a conversation I should have had years ago," she said. Gordon pulled up the stool near the bench. "I've got time." She told him everything. Not the polished version, not the press release version, the actual version, the product failures, the compliance review, the engineers who'd left, the flagship system that wasn't working, and the team that couldn't figure out why. She told him what the repair logs showed, and what she'd thought when she saw them. She was direct and she was honest, and if that was harder for her than her usual boardroom register, she didn't show it much. Gordon's listened without interrupting. Once he glanced at the clock near the door, not impatiently, just a reflex. Poppy's school pickup was at 3, he had time. When Constance finished, there was a pause. "The units you've been sending me," Gordon said. "The motor controllers, the relay boards, the sequential timers, you know what most of them have in common?" She waited. Whoever wired them the first time was working too fast. The connections aren't wrong, exactly. They're just not right enough. They hold under normal load, but when you push them, heat, sustained draw, anything above 80%, they start to drift. He picked up a small component from the edge of the bench, turned it between his fingers. Your control system is probably doing the same thing, just at a bigger scale. Better designed on paper than it is in practice. Constance was quiet for a moment. Could you look at it? I'd have to see the specs and the test logs. I can have them to you today. Gordon looked at her steadily, not with hostility, not with the satisfaction of a man watching a rival stumble, just, carefully, the way he looked at any problem before he decided what it needed. My daughter gets out of school at 3, he said. I'll look at what you send tonight, after she's in bed. I'll tell you what I think by Thursday. Before we go further, do you think the people quietly holding things together are the last ones companies think to call? Leave a comment. Where are you watching from? The specs arrived at 4:15 p.m. Gordon made Poppy grilled cheese, helped her with a worksheet on the water cycle, read 2 chapters of a book about a dog detective that she was very serious about, and got her to bed by 7:45. Then he sat down at the small desk in the corner of the kitchen, pushed aside a permission slip and a grocery list, and opened the files. He worked until 1 a.m. What he found was not catastrophic. That was almost the harder thing to explain. If the system had failed spectacularly, the cause would have been obvious. Instead, it had failed the way most things fail, gradually, through accumulation. A thermal management assumption that worked in testing but underperformed in varied field conditions. A load balancing sequence that was elegant in design, but created micro-interruptions under specific timing patterns. A calibration protocol that required a precision that the manufacturing process wasn't consistently delivering. None of these were unfixable. All of them had been fixable from the beginning, if someone had been looking at the right things. Gordon wrote his findings in plain language. No jargon, no hedging, no performance, 3 pages numbered, with annotated diagrams. He sent it to the email address Constance had written on a business card and left on his workbench. At 6:10 a.m. Thursday, his phone rang. This is more useful than anything my internal team has produced in 4 months, Constance said. How long would it take you to walk through this with the engineering group? What's the emergency? Federal compliance review is in 6 weeks. If we can't demonstrate a resolution path, the contract review becomes something worse. Gordon looked out the kitchen window. The sky was just getting light. Poppy's backpack was by the door, already packed, because Poppy was the kind of kid who packed her backpack the night before. I can come in 2 afternoons a week, he said. I'm not available until after 9 in the morning, and I'm gone by 2:30. I keep my shop open Mondays and Fridays. A pause. That's not exactly a conventional arrangement, no, Gordon agreed, but it's what I've got. Another pause, shorter this time. Thursday and Tuesday afternoons, I'll send a car, I can drive myself. The next 4 weeks were unlike anything Gordon had experienced since his years as a junior field technician, back before Poppy, before Claire's illness, when he had briefly worked for a regional electrical contractor, and spent his days climbing into the backs of industrial machines, and figuring out why they didn't work. He had forgotten how much he'd loved that. The collaboration, the shared language of problem-solving, the particular satisfaction of watching something click into place for a room full of people. Hargrove's engineering team was younger than he expected, and more capable than the situation suggested. They hadn't failed because they weren't good. They had failed because they had been given insufficient time, insufficient oversight, and a culture that had quietly penalized people for raising concerns. Gordon recognized that culture. He had watched it happen at the contractor firm too, years ago, before he went out on his own. He didn't lecture anyone about it, he just worked. He showed the team how he had analyzed the thermal management problem. He asked questions instead of giving answers when the questions would teach more than the answers. He brought in a diagnostic approach he'd developed over years of solo work, slow, methodical, obsessive about first principles, and he taught it to 2 of the junior engineers who took to it immediately. One of them, a 26-year-old named Drew Ferris, started staying late of his own initiative. Within 10 days, Drew had identified a secondary calibration issue that Gordon hadn't caught. Gordon told him so directly, in front of the team. Drew looked like he'd been handed something he'd been waiting for. Constance observed much of this without participating. She attended the technical sessions, but sat off to the side, taking notes. Gordon was aware of her presence without being distracted by it. Once, after a long session that ran 40 minutes past when he'd planned to leave, she walked him to the parking lot and said, "You're doing something I didn't expect." He got his keys out. "What's that?" "You're not just fixing the system. You're fixing the team." Gordon thought about it for a second. "Well," he said, "one usually doesn't hold without the other." He drove to pick up Poppy from after-school care, which she attended on Tuesdays and Thursdays now, and which she had decided was acceptable because her best friend also went on Tuesdays. The compliance review came on a cold Friday in December. Gordon wasn't there for it. He was in his shop, working on a residential panel for a client in Baxter Heights, listening to the radio. At 3:47 p.m., his phone buzzed with a text from a number he'd saved as Hargrove. "Constance, we passed. Full clearance." "Thank you." He set the phone down and finished the panel. Then he picked it up again and texted back. "Good. Drew did well." 3 dots appeared. "Then he did, so did you." Gordon set the phone on the bench, picked up his screwdriver and went back to work. He was cleaning up at 5:30 when his phone rang again. "Constance. I'd like to make you a formal offer," she said. "Senior technical advisor, contract-based, flexible structure, you'd consult on systems development and quality review, the things we clearly needed someone asking the right questions about a long time ago." A pause. "The hours would be what you need them to be. I've been informed, fairly directly, that this is non-negotiable." Gordon almost smiled. "Who told you that?" "You did. In the parking lot. You also told the facilities coordinator that you wouldn't accept a retainer that required you to be unreachable between 2:30 and 4:30, because that's when your daughter needs you." He put it in the contract notes. Gordon leaned against the workbench. Outside, the streetlight on Weston had just clicked on, the way it did every evening right around now. "I'd need meaningful input," he said, "not decorative. If I'm looking at quality and systems, my findings go somewhere real. They will, and I keep the shop, the independent work. That's your business to run." He thought about Claire, briefly. "Not with sadness, exactly. More the way you think about the person who taught you the most important thing you know, and feel the weight of it, the responsibility of it, when something significant is happening. Claire used to say that integrity isn't the thing you perform when someone's watching, it's the thing you do when no one is, and then you keep doing when they finally are." "Okay," he said, "let's talk terms." Tuesday mornings on Weston Street looked different now. No white van, no clipboard shoved through a window. No equipment unloaded anonymously against a fence, by a man who never said anything beyond what the paperwork required. Instead, twice a week, Gordon drives downtown in his own truck, signs in at the front desk of a glass building, where the receptionist knows his name, and spends his afternoons in a conference room, with engineers who have learned to bring their hard questions to him first. Not because he always has the answer, but because he asks the questions that find it. His shop on Weston is still open, Mondays and Fridays, and some Saturday mornings when the work requires it. There's a proper sign out front now, backlit, readable from the street. Poppy helped him choose the font, a decision she took very seriously. The workbench is the same, the pegboard is the same, the photograph in the corner is the same. Poppy is 11 now. She has started asking questions about how things work, not electronics specifically, just things in general, the principle of it, why something does what it does. Gordon answers every question as completely as he can, and then asks one back, because that's the thing that actually teaches. Constance came by the shop in January, on a Friday afternoon, unannounced. No business reason. She brought coffee. They sat on the 2 stools near the workbench, and talked about nothing in particular for about 40 minutes. About the neighborhood, about a documentary she'd watched, about Poppy's current ambition to become a marine biologist, or possibly an architect. She hadn't decided. Before she left, Constance said, "I've been thinking about something." She looked at the workbench, the tools on the board, all of it. "This place kept a significant piece of our operation functional for 9 years, and we never even knew your first name." Gordon considered that. "Well," he said, "you know it now." She nodded once. Then she left, and Gordon went back to the relay board he'd been working on when she arrived. There is a version of this story that ends with someone getting what they deserve. Credit claimed, wrongs corrected, the record set straight in some official and satisfying way. But that's not quite how it happened, and it's probably not how most of it works. What actually happened is quieter than that. A man did careful work in a small space for a long time. The work mattered, even when no one was watching. And eventually, someone looked up from the spreadsheet long enough to see it. Companies don't survive because of their brand, or their projections, or the confidence they perform in quarterly calls. They survive because somewhere, usually without acknowledgement, someone still cares enough to do the thing right. The question isn't whether those people exist. They always exist. The question is whether anyone in a position to know them ever bothers to learn their name.